A couple of years ago, I was walking home from a late-night party. It was around 3 a.m., and the streets were eerily empty. I had to cross a small bridge to get to my neighborhood, a path I had taken countless times. As I walked, I noticed a man coming toward me from the opposite direction. He was just an ordinary guy wearing a hoodie. Nothing unusual. We passed each other and I kept walking. A few moments later, I heard footsteps again, this time behind me. I turned around, and there he was, walking toward me once more. Same face, same hoodie, same distance between us as before. I felt a chill, but convinced myself it was just my imagination. But when I reached the middle of the bridge, it happened again. He was in front of me, as if he had somehow circled around without me noticing. This time I froze. He stopped too. His face looked too perfect, like it wasn't real. Terrified, I turned and ran all the way home. I haven't walked that bridge since. I used to work construction in the outskirts of Delhi. It was a brutally hot summer, and we were on tight deadlines, often working from sunrise to sunset. One evening, I was assigned to stay behind and keep watch over the site's tools and materials. I sat near the storage container, staring into the darkness, when I heard a faint rustling sound behind me. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I saw a figure in an old, faded jumpsuit standing near the edge of the site. I called out, thinking it was one of the workers, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, facing away from me. I got up and approached him, but as I got closer, he began walking toward a ditch at the far end of the site. I ran after him, but by the time I reached the ditch, he was gone. All I found was a rusted helmet lying on the ground. When I returned to the container, I noticed something even stranger. All the clocks on my watch, my phone, even the wall had stopped at 3:15 a.m. I never stayed on night duty again. A few years back, I was managing my family's small hotel in northern Italy. We had an older gentleman staying with us, the kind who keeps to himself and doesn't talk much. He paid on time and didn't cause any trouble. One morning I went to clean his room and found it completely empty. Everything was gone, no luggage, no clothes, not even a wrinkle on the bedspread. It looked like no one had ever stayed there. At first, I thought he had checked out early, but the key was still at the reception desk. Stranger still, when I checked the guest log, his name wasn't listed. I reviewed the security cameras, but there was no record of him entering or leaving the building. The only trace he left behind was an old coin sitting on the windowsill in the room. I couldn't identify the currency. It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. I've kept the coin, but I don't tell guests this story. Who would want to stay in a haunted hotel? When I was a student in Tokyo, I often used the subway to get to my classes. One morning, I was running late and hurried to the platform. It was unusually quiet, and the electronic boards that usually showed the train schedule were blank. After a while, most of the people left, but I stayed, seeing faint lights in the tunnel ahead. When the train arrived, it looked strange old, with faded paint and outdated designs. Thinking it was just an older model still in use, I boarded. The passengers inside were silent, all dressed in clothes that looked like they were from the 1950s. As the train moved, I noticed something odd. The windows showed nothing but darkness, no stations, no advertisements, nothing. When the train finally stopped, I stepped out onto a platform I didn't recognize. The signage was written in an outdated font, and the station looked abandoned. I turned around to ask for help, but the train had vanished. I never found that station on any map. I'm a journalist in Paris, And this happened while I was walking home late one night. It was raining, and the streets were mostly deserted. As I crossed a dimly lit intersection, I noticed a man standing under a street lamp. He was wearing a long black coat and had an unnaturally pale face. At first, I thought he might need directions, but as I got closer, I felt uneasy. His features were too sharp, his eyes too large, and his smile too wide. Then he spoke. "You've been here before." His voice was deep and unnatural. I turned to look around, thinking someone else might be nearby. But when I looked back, he was gone. I rushed home and checked the time, only to realize that my walk, which usually takes 20 minutes, had somehow lasted over 2 hours. Several years ago, I was visiting a friend in Quebec. We spent the day exploring the old part of the city and decided to grab dinner at a small restaurant we stumbled upon. The place had a vintage charm, with wooden tables and oil lamps for lighting. There was no one else inside, just the two of us. We ordered, and within minutes, our food arrived, as if it had already been prepared. The waiter was polite but strange. He said, "You'll come back sooner than you think." A week later, I found myself back in Quebec for an unrelated work trip. Curious, I went to look for the restaurant, but it wasn't there. In its place was a souvenir shop that had clearly been there for years. No one I asked had ever heard of the restaurant. Thanks for watching. More stories on the channel.